So you're looking at buying some real estate property in the future, and you've heard the terms freehold and leasehold. Well, they are terms that you definitely need to understand because each of those gives different ownership rights over the property, and they have different pros and cons that are associated with them. And so the majority of all the properties in the Vancouver market, in the Greater Vancouver area, are going to be freehold, leasehold, or cooperative housing. The most common of those are freehold and leasehold, and it's exactly what I'm gonna dive into on this video. So make sure to stick around so you understand what the pros and cons of each of these are, so you can make the best informed decision when it comes to your real estate here in the Greater Vancouver area. My name is Jonathan Lerner with the Vancouver Life Real Estate Group and eXp Realty, and our team here, we get calls, we get texts, we get emails every single day from people just like you that are inquiring and wanting to learn more about the Greater Vancouver real estate market and what it is like living in Vancouver and the surrounding cities. So if you have questions, if you have concerns, or you want to learn more about what it's like living here or how to buy a property here, then make sure to give us a call, send us an email, send us a text, or schedule a Zoom call with us so we can get face to face, and the link is right down below in the description of this video. Okay, let's dive into today's video on leasehold versus freehold and the pros and cons of each. What should you buy, freehold or leasehold property? Well, it depends, and we're gonna dive into exactly what each of those options are, what they look like, and the pros and cons of each. So let's jump into freehold first. As most of you know what this is, even if you never even heard of the term freehold. So essentially, freehold, it means that when you own a property that has freehold ownership, you own the property and the land that it sits on. So both the property and the land are owned in perpetuity by the owner, and they can be used however you please, of course, within local regulations and what the zonings are. Now, when it comes to leasehold means that you're leasing the land from the owner of it for a specified period of time. So say, for example, you purchase a detached single-family home, that is leasehold. You may own the building, but you just rent the ground, and you're going to pay additional maintenance fees and service charges because the owner of the land is responsible for the land. And typically those costs are going to be passed on to you as the leasee, though, of the property. With your monthly fees are typically going to be included the costs of property taxes, insurance on the land, financing fees, and more, whatever the owner typically has to pay. So here's an example of what you'll often see in Vancouver's West End downtown. You'll find several condos here like this one at 407 1330 Harwood Street that's listed at just under $550,000 for almost 800 square feet in a 2-bedroom condo, which is a phenomenal price for a property downtown Vancouver. It's been on the market for 145 days, and you wonder why this is. And I mean, check this out, this south-facing view from the unit, and absolutely just beautiful inside. It is dated in terms of the flooring and the walls. Looks like these pictures are actually virtually staged. So this isn't the furniture that's actually in there, but it shows you what you can do in the space. But the aspect of where the pricing comes in is, yes, it's cheap, so your monthly mortgage payments are going to be lower, but the monthly strata fee, maintenance fee, lease fee that you're going to be paying for this is almost $820 a month, whereas typically you're going to be seeing this at, 50, 55, maybe 60 cents a square foot, whereas this is over $1 a square foot for this property. And it's because you're taking into effect of all those maintenance fees that I was talking about. Your property taxes are included in this as well, and your leasing fees. So that's a big reason and aspect why, as much as the purchase price is going to be cheaper, your monthly fees are going to be higher for a property like this, which will offset that slightly, although typically the lower purchase price cost is still going to make up for that. The other aspect of this is that as you're leasing the land, just as if you're leasing a building for a business, there is an end date to the lease. Now for property, most commonly it's 99 years. What's really important to know, though, is not just what happens at the end of the lease, but what happens as you get closer to the end of the lease. And I'm going to touch on that as we get into the pros and cons of freehold and leasehold. But first, who are the landlords? Who are the owners of the land that you're typically going to be dealing with most often? In the Greater Vancouver area, you're really going to see 3 landlords. You're first going to see the municipalities, which is going to be the city of Vancouver, for example, which you'll typically find them the owners of land in the False Creek and Champlain Heights areas. The second you see is going to be your government educational institutions like the University of British Columbia and Simon Fraser University. You're going to see a lot of. As well, you have First Nations land, which currently you don't see a lot in the city of Vancouver itself, although it is here, typically primarily in the Southlands area, the Musqueam lands, but you're gonna see it a lot more in the surrounding cities and suburbs around outside of the city of Vancouver. Now I wanna share 2 more terms that are very important to know before we go into the pros and cons of freehold and leasehold. Within the leasehold umbrella, you're going to hear the terms strata and non-strata, as well as prepaid and non-prepaid lease. Strata is going to be your condos and your townhouses where you pay a monthly fee towards the upkeep and maintenance of the building and the grounds. If you are in the US, this is going to be the same as your HOA fee. Now, non-strata is typically referring to your detached homes, but you are going to find some non-strata condo buildings in the mix, like the one that I showed you in the video previously already. Prepaid, the property sits on leasehold land, but the use of the land has been prepaid. For example, maybe a developer wants to develop the land. So they go to the owner of the land, they pay a certain amount of money to be able to, essentially, they pay a lease on the land, typically 99 years, to be able to build on and develop the land. And then that cost will typically be transferred in the sale of the unit to you. So typically it's going to be a higher sale price when you purchase a property that has a prepaid leasehold on it. If you have a non-prepaid, typically the purchase price of that is going to be lower, but your monthly costs are going to be higher because the cost of the lease has to be incorporated in somewhere. So you are paying for that in a different way. Rather than the purchase price of the unit, it's in the monthly fees that you pay to the lessor or the owner of the land. Okay, let's dive into the basic pros and cons of both freehold and leasehold to give you a fuller picture of each of these here. And then because it's important to be able to distinguish between the two and really understand leasehold, because it's a increasingly abundant housing opportunity and supply that we're getting here, and you're gonna come across it in your search for property in the Greater Vancouver area. What are the pros of freehold? Let's dive into those right now. All right, number one is that you own the building and the land. Super, super important, and that's where the majority of the value is in a property is in the lands. Number two, there's no ground rent because you're not leasing the land from anybody. You're not paying anyone for the land because you've already purchased that and it comes with the property. You have full control over maintenance decisions. Now, if you're in a condo strata building, that might be a little bit different, but in terms of renovations, if you want to do anything within your property, changes to electrical or anything like that, that is completely up to you. If you live in a detached home, well, then you can make all the decisions you want with respect to the property, the landscape, and the grounds. That's completely up to you, and you don't need to get permission or approval from another, whether the owner, landlord, or from the strata to be able to do that. Pro number four is that there's no restrictions on inheritance. So you can do with the property what you want because there's no expiry to the ownership. As long as you continue paying your fees and your property taxes, you can keep that property forever and pass it on to whoever you want. Freehold has much greater inventory because it is more of a higher demand type of product and a higher demand type of property ownership. So you have a lot more inventory if you're looking strictly at freehold. When it comes to the cons of freehold, there's really only two cons. And the first one is that it is a higher purchasing price. So especially for first-time homeowners, if you are trying to get into the market, this is a higher price product. So it is a little bit hard to get into the market with a freehold product. The second con with freehold is that it was a pro in the sense that you have full control over all the maintenance when you do it, what you do, but at the same time, all that maintenance is on you as well. So it is something that you have to be aware of. You should be aware of how long does the roof last, how long does electrical or plumbing in the home that you have last, and when should it be replaced or updated, making sure that you're aware of what those timelines are so that your home stays in the best condition possible when you do plan to go on and sell or make some different changes. You're not worried about having to fix a big problem because you haven't done the small maintenance issues over time. Next, let's dive into the pros of leasehold. And pro number one for leasehold property is that the purchase price is cheaper than freehold. And you're gonna notice a significant difference in that because you don't own the land. So the biggest part of the value of the property is no longer coming with the property when you have leasehold. So the purchasing price, the sale price is lower than freehold. Second pro of leasehold is that it is often found in a prime location. You don't really have leasehold way out in the boonies. You have leasehold properties where it is very convenient for people. You know, on university campus at University of British Columbia, a lot of that property is all leasehold for easy access for those people that want access to either the forest or the actual university campus itself and living on the campus. Pro number three for leasehold is that the landscaping maintenance is up to the landlord and the owner of the land. So you don't have to worry about that. Now, probably you're paying for that on a monthly basis for them to be able to keep that upkeep, but you don't have to worry about the maintenance on the land itself. Pro number four for leasehold is that they do hold their value, especially if you're in a prime desirable location. Now, that does change a little bit as you get closer closer to the end of the expiry, the end of the lease, which I'll touch on a little bit more in the cons of leasehold, but for the most part, they do hold their value. Pro number 5 for leasehold is that leaseholds do appreciate in value as well. Now, they don't appreciate to the same extent as freehold. However, they do appreciate fairly close. And the biggest difference with leasehold and freehold in terms of appreciation is that the purchase price of leasehold is lower, it's smaller. And so if you take $1 million freehold property and maybe a $500,000 leasehold property, maybe they appreciate 5% each over the same period of time. But because the purchase price of $500,000 versus $1 million is very, very different, you don't see the change in value as much, so you don't get the return component in terms of appreciation as much over time with that. Let's dive into the cons of leasehold property. And con number 1 is that you don't own the land. You only own the building or a portion of the building on which the land that you are leasing from. Con number 2 for leasehold is that you only have use of the land for a specified duration. Whatever it is that you agree to in the contract of the lease, that is the time period that you have use of the land. And as you get closer to the end of the lease, then you have negotiation. And that brings us into con number 3, is that at the end of the lease, the only asset you have is the building, which for a lot of leases, they are 99 years old. So that building has grown old and it has depreciated over that time. And in a condo, you don't even necessarily have the building because you can't take that with you anywhere either. Con number 4 of leasehold is that you pay ground rent and higher maintenance fees. If you have a freehold condo unit, maybe your fees are $500 for that freehold condo unit. In a leasehold, that same unit may be $700 or $800 as a result of the lease. And so your monthly maintenance fees and lease fees are going to be higher. Con number 5 of leasehold is what happens at the end of the lease is uncertain. You don't know what's going to happen. Closer to the end of the term, it is harder to sell, and buyers either can't get financing or it's more difficult to get financing, and the banks don't want to lend. So there's a lot of uncertainty in terms of what's going to happen at the end of the lease. You as the leasee are going to go into a negotiation with the leaseor, with the landlord. So you're going to need to read through and understand the details of what happens at the expiry. And you're going to be able to see this in your lease contract. So if you look at a leasehold property, there's going to be a lease contract. It's typically going to be a head lease and a ground lease. And you want to read those in detail to see what are the terms of the lease, but what are the terms and what are the clauses, the contractual things you're agreeing to that are going to happen at the end of the lease as you get closer to the expiry, because those are very, very important details to know that are also going to determine if you don't plan on being in this place until the end of that lease, is it going to make it substantially harder for you to sell depending on what those terms are. Here's the other aspect about a leasehold is that as you get at the end of the lease, it's very, very hard to be able to get a buyer because, again, like I said, the end of the lease, what happens after that is very uncertain. And so really, ultimately, you have one buyer at the end of the lease, and that's the owner of the land. And so if those terms are not favorable to you, and maybe you're in a condo building, well, you got 50 other or 100 other owners that are going to be within the same contractual type of agreement. You can't really renegotiate your single unit. You just have to go along with what has been presented to you because there literally is one buyer, and that's the owner of the land. So it makes it hard for you to be able to fight and get on the winning side of it because, again, what else do you have to be able to back you up? They have the power on that end of it at the end of the lease. So ultimately, at the end of the day, it's super important to understand each and every single lease contract that you read through. What are the terms? What are the conditions? How do they affect you today? How do they affect you as you get closer to the end of the lease and at the actual end of the lease? And it's really important, again, if you don't have plans to stay in there for a very long time until closer to the expiry, how is that going to affect you when it comes to selling the property as well? Now, there's some financial considerations you need to take into account when you're thinking about purchasing a leasehold property, or if you already own one, what it's going to be like to be able to sell on the other side from the buyer's perspective. Because banks are generally more inclined to lend and give money on a freehold property than a leasehold one, and that's because it's considered a safer investment since the freehold property is basically expected to rise in value a greater amount than leasehold, especially as you get farther and farther along into the lease. They're also more likely to provide more money for a loan compared to a leasehold property, and you might even get a better interest rate on a freehold property versus a leasehold one as well. Having said that, freehold, as I said earlier in the video, is typically always going to be a more expensive purchase up front, so your financial commitments on a monthly basis are typically going to be higher with a freehold property versus a leasehold. And that's typically the biggest win there for leasehold, is that it's cheaper on a monthly basis. Now, can you get a mortgage for a leasehold property that has less than 25 years remaining? You can, but banks will only provide an amortization period, meaning the period of time, the number of years that you have to be able to pay off the entire sale purchase price of the property. So if a property is $500,000 and you purchase that today and there's 25 years left on the lease, you must pay that property off in 5 years less the expiry. So 25 years left on the expiry of the lease, you have to pay that off within 20 years. So a bank will not give you a loan for more with an amortization period of longer than 20 years. Now, also, if it's less than 25 years, for example, you're also probably going to have a higher down payment because, again, there's greater risk, there's more uncertainty at the end of it. And the closer and closer you get to the expiry, you may not be able to get financing at all. And there's also fewer institutions and banks that provide financing on leasehold property as well. So you start to get more and more limited the closer that you get to the expiry of a leasehold. There was a lot to take in there, separating the differences between freehold and leasehold, but ultimately what it comes down to in terms of the benefits of leasehold is that you can live in a very prime location at a cheaper cost, a cheaper purchase price. So that allows a lot of people to be able to get in the market and have a home of their own that are not worried about getting evicted because the property is being sold or a family member is moving in and then they have to find a new place to live. And so that is the biggest benefits that a lot of people turn to leasehold for. Ultimately though, it's going to depend on your situation, what you're looking for, where you want to be, how long you're going to be there, expectations in terms of changes in your life situation, and really understanding those different aspects of each and every single lease. That if you are open a leasehold property, you have to look at the different details of each and every property and what are the details of the lease itself and what are you committing to contractually and how is that going to affect you both today as well as further down in the lease. I hope you found some value in that, so please make sure to give a like to this video if you got some value from it, and please make sure to comment down below and what was the highlight out of this video that you got in terms of what I shared about leasehold, or if there's anything missing that I didn't answer, please comment down below the video and let me know so I can help answer anything that I missed in this video. Again, trying to give you a big bird's eye view of leasehold versus freehold. There's obviously some more details and things that come into it, but hopefully this was a good, strong, in-depth video to be able to provide the answers to most of those questions. Again, my name is Jonathan Lerner with the Vancouver Life Real Estate Group and eXp Realty, and I do videos like this each and every single week, as well as highlighting what are the different things happening in the market right now today so that you can make a better informed decision of moving to Vancouver and the surrounding suburbs to be able to help you live the Vancouver life.